Dawn breaks over a world that has forgotten how to breathe. The horizon burns in muted silver as the first light slides across the sea, revealing the dark silhouettes of steel and men moving toward destiny. Engines murmur beneath the waves, their rhythm steady, their purpose absolute. Every sound feels heavier than it should. The hum of machinery, the hiss of salt air, the quiet pulse before violence. No one speaks. They don't have to. Each man already knows that what waits ahead will test more than courage, it will measure survival itself. Inside the bridge, the air is thick with oil and tension. Orders pass in clipped whispers, hands move across cold metal eyes locked on the horizon. The smell of fuel, the scrape of boots, the faint echo of radar, every detail vibrates with precision and dread. Somewhere beyond that faint mist lies an enemy unseen, yet certain one that has learned to strike from beyond reach, one that has rewritten the rules of war. The sea looks calm, but it lies. Beneath its still surface waits a trap shaped by intelligence, invention, and vengeance. The men standing here do not yet know it, but this morning will redraw the boundaries between hunter and hunted. And when the first shadow falls across the sky, history will no longer move in silence. It will roar to life in fire and steel. The horizon trembles as the light of dawn bleeds fully into the sea. The calm that held its breath only moments ago begins to fracture under the weight of movement, coordinated, precise, and silent. From the edge of the mist, a convoy cuts through the gray expanse black hulls, gliding like predators through cold water. What had seemed like stillness was only discipline, the tense rhythm before the machinery of war begins to speak. On the lead vessel, officers pace the deck with studied calm, scanning the line of escort ships holding formation along the outer perimeter. Every bearing, every distance, every sector of ocean is measured and known. This is no aimless patrol, it is a passage plan down to the minute across waters that have claimed too many before them. Far beyond the horizon, an unseen enemy watches. High above the clouds, aircraft move in silence. Engines throttled low to remain ghosts in the sky. Between these two forces stretches an invisible battlefield, one side clinging to steel and discipline, the other wielding speed and precision. The convoy believes in its doctrine and the mathematics of defense, in the promise that overlapping walls of fire can keep the sky from falling. Yet doctrine is only comfort when the unknown begins to move. The command bridge is alive with quiet control. Voices overlap in measured tones as officers relay bearings, confirm speed, mark the sea for threats that may never appear. Maps are spread under dim red lamps covered in pencil lines that twist like scars across the bay. Coordinates, tide calculations, and wireless signals form a web of confidence, a belief that knowledge itself is armor. But even the most exact coordinates can't chart what waits beyond them. Somewhere above or below something has already seen them. The tension is not spoken, but it's everywhere in the set of a jaw, the turn of a head, the stillness of a hand hovering over a switch. Every man aboard carries his own version of the same thought. Will this crossing hold? They've been told the new formation works, that numbers and range will shield them, that the enemy no longer dares to come close. Yet beneath the hum of the engines lies a quieter truth. They are sailing through a graveyard of theories. Every few miles wreckage sleeps beneath the waves, metal bones of ships that once believed the same. On the forward deck, the gunners adjust their sights, checking elevation range and traverse. The weapons glint with morning frost barrels angled upward, waiting for a sky that is still empty. The crews move with the instinct of repetition: load, check, adjust, breathe. The flak mounts are ready. Ammunition belts feed into steel mouths that will soon roar. The men trust the numbers: 2,000 meters, effective 4,000, in theory 1,000 rounds a minute when fear gives way to reflex. They've been drilled to believe in these limits. But none of them have ever seen an enemy that attacks from beyond every calculation. Across the water, sister ships keep pace, their wakes slicing in parallel ribbons of white. Between them move smaller escorts, minesweepers, running their silent pattern ahead of the main formation. Each vessel knows its role. Each commander believes the plan is sound. Above them, the sky remains deceptively clean, a blue canvas about to be torn apart. Orders flow. with mechanical calm. Maintain bearing. Adjust course check frequencies. It is the language of control spoken to ward off chaos. In the operations room below deck, a junior officer studies the sonar return nothing unusual. The screen flickers with the heartbeat of the sea, the rhythmic pulse of safety. The officer breathes easier. On his desk lies a report from the previous night. No confirmed sightings, no intercepted signals, only calm weather and open water. He taps the paper once, as if sealing its truth. Outside, the engines continue their endless rotation, pistons driving through the deep blind faith made mechanical. Far above, the air begins to shift. A sound barely audible, a distant thrum carried by wind. To the men below, it is nothing yet. To the few on the bridge with trained ears, it's the first crack in the illusion of safety. They look up, instinct before reason eyes, narrowing into the glare. Nothing but cloud. Still, one officer reaches for his binoculars, slow, deliberate, the way a man does when he isn't sure what he'll find. The tension hardens into something physical, a weight pressing against the chest. The convoy continues forward, blind to the eyes already fixed upon it from miles above. The tactical picture, once a clear grid of geometry, has begun to dissolve into something less predictable. There is no warning siren, no dramatic signal, only a silence that grows sharper with every passing second. Somewhere in that silence, the first line between safety and combat is crossed. Inside the bridge, the commander senses it before instruments confirm it. Experience has its own kind of radar. He doesn't yet know what's coming, only that the sea feels different now, charged, alive, waiting to erupt. Orders are issued with the same composure as before, but the tone has changed, subtle and unmistakable. Increase watch rotation, double-check horizon sectors, signal escorts to tighten formation. Every movement is small, calculated, but it carries the same underlying truth: they are no longer alone. The ocean that once promised passage now feels like a trap of open space. The formation tightens instinctively, ships drawing closer, gunners at stations, spotters scanning the sky. The men can't see the threat, but they can feel it pressing in from beyond sight. The first call from the lookout tower breaks the still air, a shape, a glint, maybe just light on metal. It's enough. The order follows instantly. Battle readiness. Every ship in the line shifts from silence to tension. Engines surge. Radios crackle. The convoy, moments ago steady and sure, becomes a coiled machine of reflex and fear. Somewhere above the clouds, the hunters descend. But down here, the defenders don't know yet what kind of enemy approaches. They only know the sound that rises through the wind, the low thunder that means the waiting is over. The time for belief has passed. What comes next will not test strategy or doctrine. It will test survival. The calm sea has given its last gift, one final heartbeat before the sky breaks open. The change arrives like a new note, in a familiar song, subtle at first, then obvious, reshaping everything that follows. Where the convoy's discipline once felt like armor, a different kind of instrument is being readied beyond the men's sight, a weapon born from industry, stubborn ingenuity, and a refusal to accept old limits. Reports have come down the chain, whispers at first, engineers' sketches and laboratory assessments filed under cautious headings, yet none of that paper can fully prepare a sailor for the moment when theory becomes thunder. The attackers are not merely pilots with rockets or bombs. They bring a deliberate marriage of artillery and airframe, a heavy-caliber gun transplanted into a platform built for speed and surprise. It is a breach of expectation, a flying piece of artillery designed to reach out and touch steel where it thought itself safe. On the decks, gunners tighten gloves around cold barrels and glance skyward as if sensing an odd imbalance in the air. Below, technicians check mechanisms that have long been relied upon to counter the usual threats. The mathematics of range and effective engagement are printed on paper that suddenly seems to belong to another era. This new weapon does not press the same limits that the convoy's defenses were built to meet. Its range extends where doctrine says fire should cease to be effective. Its projectile carries the sort of punch that upends assumptions about hull integrity and the illusion that distance equals safety. Those who maintain watch understand the geometry of defense. Overlapping arcs of anti-aircraft fire create a cage, a lethal lattice that in most circumstances forces attackers to close before they can strike. But the lattice has been measured against a different kind of assault, and now the measurements must be questioned. It is not just the size of the gun or the weight of a single shell that unsettles. It is the way the gun has been tamed to live on an aircraft, autoloaders and hydraulic buffers, reinforced fuselages, a reallocation of space and balance that make brutality precise and controllable. What engineers have done is more surgical than brute force. They have engineered feeding mechanisms that swallow heavy rounds. They have built mounts that cradle recoil. They have sacrificed redundant weapons to carry a single, decisive instrument. The result is an aerial platform that can stand outside the envelope of most anti-aircraft systems and deliver punishment with the accuracy of a driven nail. To watchers who have only ever trained their sights to expect certain approaches, the idea is almost heretical. Why would a gun that belonged to a tank belong to a plane? Because war is a harsh tutor, and necessity teaches strange alliances between technologies. Word spreads downward through the formation in that peculiar way operational rumors do quietly then with growing certainty. Pilots' notes, guarded memos, and the occasional sketch passed between briefing officers paint a picture that is both simple and terrifying. Long-range, high-precision fire from the air that can reach into the heart of a convoy before the defender's guns can reliably interdict it. And where doctrine once said that an attacker had to come within a certain range to be effective, the new calculus says otherwise. The men who load belts and train sights feel it first in the way their confidence frays. Habits that had been practiced until reflex take on an anxious edge. Training that once felt sufficient now reads like an archive of yesterday's tactics. Confidence becomes a brittle thing. Tactically, the implications ripple outward like concentric waves. Escorts recalibrate their station keeping. Minesweepers shorten patterns. Commanders sketch contingency plans on the back of envelopes. The formation that was supposed to present a united front now bears the small human marks of doubt, hesitations and orders a slower cadence to commands an extra checking of instruments. Intelligence officers pore over decrypted messages and aerial photos trying to quantify the threat. Their reports shift from speculation to urgent recommendation, maintain distance, increase aerial reconnaissance, and demand fighter cover, where before it had been optional. The conversation moves from theory, what if, to action, what now? For those aboard each ship, the psychological effect is immediate. Where the sea's expanse once offered a kind of buffer, it now feels like a stage upon which unseen marksmen test their aim. Men who have trained to meet dive bombing and low-level strafing find the terms of engagement changed. Their training speaks to a different enemy, one that must be met at different ranges with different tools. The gunners who once measured success in the flash of tracers and the air torn by bursting shells search the sky for forms that do not come into the expected zone. Their instruments tell them the truth, that the air beyond their reach is not empty, and so they learn unease. Commanders who have long relied on doctrine to prescribe certainty now have to factor in a variable that rewrites risk. At the same time, the attackers refine their art. They do not rely on brute force alone. Instead, they choreograph approach vectors that keep the sun at their back altitudes, that allow them to observe without immediate retribution, and sequencing that concentrates effect on selected targets. They pair heavy gun platforms with conventional fighter bombers, one to reach out and suppress the most dangerous points of defense, the others to close when smoke and chaos create opportunities. The combination is designed to be surgical and economical, expend the most precious rounds where they achieve the highest payoff and allow speed and maneuverability to shoulder the rest of the risk. It is a lesson in economy of destruction, where each shot is chosen as if it carries the weight of a verdict. As these two worlds converge, the practiced, layered defense, rigid with confidence, and the adaptive offense that redefines reach, the stage sets itself for an inevitable clash. Instruments on the bridge will eventually register anomalies. Lookouts will report glints in the high cloud. A radio call will travel down a line that seconds earlier held only routine chatter. The formation tightens not because it is stronger, but because instinct draws it inward when faced with an unknown that penetrates its assumptions. In that tightening, the first true admission is made: the old rules will not hold. Tonight's battle will be a lesson written in smoke and steel about what happens when invention outruns expectation. The men on deck cannot yet name the change. They can only feel its cold shadow fall across the water. The moment theory meets reality, the sky ceases to be distant. It descends with noise, color, and violence that tears the air apart. The first explosions of flak bloom high above black scars against the gray. They rise blindly, reaching for enemies still invisible. But then, like wolves slipping through smoke, the attackers appear. They come in low from the east engine, screaming wings cutting through the haze. To the men on the decks, it's not sound at first. It's pressure, a vibration crawling up through the soles of their boots before the roar hits. The horizon that once felt endless now collapses into a single point of motion. Death arriving at 400 miles per hour. The formation breaks as officers bark orders. Gunners swing their mounts, tracing erratic lines across the sky, searching for angles that won't come in time. The first tracer lines streak upward, red and white threads, weaving a desperate curtain between the ships and the oncoming shapes. The air fills with the rattle of automatic fire, the thunder of engines, the hiss of shells tearing past unseen. Yet the attackers do not dive into the web of tracers. They remain just beyond it, precise and patient, unleashing flashes that come one at a time, sharp, measured, and devastating. A shockwave rips across the convoy. One of the lead escorts vanishes behind a sudden pillar of water and smoke. The sound reaches the others, a heartbeat later, deep and final. The men flinch, but keep firing. The next impact comes seconds after, farther down the line, a strike so clean it feels surgical. Each shot is a conversation between invention and survival. The old math of defense collapsing under a new geometry of attack. On the bridge, the commander grips the rail. His instruments tell him the range is impossible, yet the sea around them burns. He knows the rules. They've drilled them into every officer since the beginning. 2,000 meters effective fire, 3,000 uncertain, beyond that blind. But the reality screaming outside the glass proves otherwise. Something out there has rewritten those numbers. The gunners reload, sweat freezing on their hands. They fire until the barrels glow red, the smell of cordite mixing with oil and sea salt. Orders blur into instinct. Fire. Adjust. Fire again. The sky flickers with tracers, but the enemy remains out of reach, untouchable, as if the air itself shields them. The noise becomes a single living thing, a blend of rage, fear, and mechanical fury. Then, one of the attackers breaks formation. It banks left, rolling its wings toward the sea, before leveling out, steady, deliberate. For a moment, it hangs in the air, and then comes the flash, a single thunderclap from its nose, a shell arcing like a meteor. The impact is immediate. Steel screams and the rear deck of another ship bursts open, flames licking upward like hands reaching for the sky. The defenders watch the impossible happen again and again. Distance conquered, armor pierced, doctrine destroyed. Every decision now feels primal. The convoy tightens ships, drawing closer to overlap their fields of fire. It's a gamble born of desperation. More guns, denser defense, but it also makes them slower, easier targets. The attackers exploit it, instantly diving in pairs, one suppressing while the other fires the heavy gun with terrifying accuracy. Precision has replaced chaos. The sea itself feels smaller. Below-deck men scramble through smoke-filled corridors, sealing compartments, dragging hoses, shouting over alarms. The rhythm of battle no longer belongs to them. It belongs to the enemy, who dictates its tempo from above. On the command bridge, the radio crackles with overlapping voices, damage reports, requests for orders, broken transmissions cut by static, and fear. The commander answers none of them. His eyes are fixed on the horizon, where another flash ignites. A moment later, the shock hits the hull like a hammer blow. The difference between victory and extinction narrows to seconds. Decisions that once took minutes are now made in instinct. Fire here, turn there, hold position, dive. Every man acts on fragments of information, trusting the familiar in an unfamiliar war. Yet the attackers have the advantage of knowledge. They've studied the mathematics of range, the weaknesses in formation, the blind angles of every gun mount. Each strike feels less like combat and more like execution. A single shell tears through the bridge of the lead vessel. Glass explodes inward. The commander hits the deck as steel shards fill the air. The lights flicker, the deck tilts, alarms howl in protest. Outside flames ripple across the sea, painting the water in color that doesn't belong there. The defenders keep firing because there is nothing else to do. Doctrine says they should hold formation. Reality says they are being dismantled piece by piece. And yet, amid the chaos, defiance flares. One gunner, half blind from smoke, tracks a shadow through his sights and squeezes the trigger until the belt runs dry. Another finds his rhythm and begins to lead the targets not where they are, but where they will be. The next burst cuts close enough to make one attacker roll sharply, throwing off its aim. For an instant, hope flickers, then vanishes under another explosion. The air turns thick with smoke and flame. Ships that once moved in perfect coordination now stagger through the sea, wounded and burning. Communication breaks down, replaced by instinct and grit. What remains is endurance, the refusal to yield, even as the logic of the battle collapses around them. Above it all, the attackers maintain formation, disciplined and cold. They've turned the sky into a range, the sea into a target board. Each shot marks a revelation of power, a statement that technology has outrun courage. But even as they circle for another pass, something in the pattern shifts. The smoke thickens, visibility drops, and the defenders, stripped of formation but not resolve, begin to fire into the gray, not in precision, but in defiance. For the first time, the attackers hesitate. Their clarity falters amid the chaos they created. One pulls up too sharply, another loses alignment, and the rhythm that defined their dominance fractures. Below, amid the wreckage and fire, a surviving gun crew catches the gap and seizes it. Their barrels rise through the haze, their tracers reach into the sky, and for the briefest moment, the impossible happens. The untouchable bleeds. The shell finds its mark. A streak of flame arcs down from above, and the men on deck watch as one of the predators falls burning into the sea. The sound that follows isn't victory, it's something heavier. The rules have changed, but for one instant, so has the balance. The sea burns long after the thunder has faded. What had once been a line of proud ships now drifts in broken silhouettes, their hulls scarred and smoking their decks slick with oil and blood. The battle's roar has dissolved into a low, endless moan of metal cooling in salt water. Fragments of flak guns lie twisted among the wreckage barrels, bent like the bones of an exhausted beast. The air tastes of cordite and ash, a flavor of ruin that clings to the tongue and memory alike. For a time, no one speaks. Words have no place here. Only the sea, indifferent and wide, carries the echoes of what just happened. On the surviving vessels, the crew moves in silence, faces hollowed by the shock of survival. They have seen the impossible made real, ships struck from beyond their reach, defenses that never truly met the enemy, courage rendered useless by range and precision. The commanders issue orders out of habit more than necessity. Seal compartments, check survivors, keep discipline. But the authority in their voices is gone, replaced by something quieter, heavier. They know that no amount of repair will fix what's been broken tonight. Not the ships, not the confidence, not the belief that doctrine could shield them from innovation. Bodies are pulled from the water, wrapped in canvas, laid side by side on what remains of the deck. The ocean that once carried them now returns them, changed. Each face bears the same expression, eyes open, as if still trying to see the enemy that killed them. Around them, the living move like ghosts, repairing what can be repaired, ignoring what can't. Smoke drifts across the horizon, forming a shroud between sea and sky. It feels less like victory or defeat, and more like revelation, that war no longer belongs to those who can shout the loudest or stand the longest, but to those who can reach the farthest. The tactical reports will later call it a partial success. The escorts performed their duties. The convoy reached its destination. The losses were within acceptable limits. But the men who were there will remember something else. The sensation of helplessness. The knowledge that they were being dismantled by forces they couldn't even see clearly. The gunners will replay the moment when their tracers stopped short, when the sky seemed to mock their efforts. The commanders will carry the image of each hit, each flash of light, where theory failed and reality took its place. It wasn't just steel that broke, it was the certainty of control. In the aftermath, intelligence officers begin their analysis, sifting through fragments of recovered shell casings, radio intercepts, and survivors' testimonies. They speak in terms of data and performance metrics, range differentials, projectile velocity, rate of fire. But beneath the numbers runs a colder truth, one of psychology. The fear that now grips every crewman preparing to sail these waters again. Every report, no matter how objective, carries the same unspoken conclusion: the enemy has changed the shape of the battlefield. To fight them with the old logic is to die in ignorance. For those who witnessed it firsthand, the change goes deeper than tactics. It has entered the rhythm of their thoughts. They glance upward when engines hum, even friendly ones. They move more cautiously on deck. They write shorter letters home as if brevity can ward off fate. Each man, in his own way, has begun to understand that courage alone no longer decides survival. Technology and intelligence, those cold, impersonal forces, now sit at the heart of every life and death decision. The old courage still matters, but it has become something quieter, stripped of pride, born of endurance rather than defiance. Below-deck repair crews work through the night. The sound of welding sparks cuts through the gloom, a mechanical heartbeat fighting back against silence. Salt water hisses on hot metal as damaged compartments are sealed. Every spark feels like a refusal to surrender completely. The engineers curse softly as they patch holes the size of men, each scar a map of where the new weapon found them. They don't yet understand exactly how it worked, only that it did. But they will learn, because they must. That learning, that adaptation, is all that separates extinction from continuation. The next morning, as the sun rises over a field of drifting debris, the survivors gather on deck. The sea has grown calm again, indifferent as ever. Smoke hangs low over the water, the wind too weak to carry it away. The commander stands by the rail, staring into the distance, where the horizon blurs into gray. His uniform is stained, his face streaked with soot and salt, but his posture remains unbroken. Around him, his men wait for orders. For a long time, there are none. Then quietly he tells them to continue home. His voice is steady, but carries a hollow note, as if part of him remains among the dead. Later, the official records will call it a lesson learned. Engineers will redesign turrets, adjust angles, extend range. Scientists will return to their drafting tables, hungry to erase vulnerability with more invention. Yet within those who fought a different kind of understanding lingers one that can't be engineered away. They have seen the future arrive, in the form of a single flash, a clean shot, fired from beyond comprehension. And they know that when it comes again, no amount of doctrine will feel safe. The ocean, ever patient, absorbs everything's smoke oil memory. By the time rescue vessels arrive, the battle has already become history. The survivors speak little. When they do, their words come out measured, stripped of drama. They talk not about glory or revenge, but about precision, distance, silence. These have become the new gods of war. Their stories will later be retold in classrooms and documentaries, but none will capture the moment itself, the instant they realized that courage could no longer close the distance between man and machine. And so the convoy limps toward port, smaller than when it began, its formation broken, but its purpose unchanged. The men aboard do not celebrate survival. They carry it like a weight, aware that the next encounter will come sooner than they wish. Behind them, the sea closes over the wreckage, erasing evidence, but not consequence. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of smoke toward the coast, a scent that will reach those who wait ashore and make them pause without knowing why. The battle is over. But something larger has begun. A change not in weapons, but in understanding. The world has seen what distance can do, and no one who witnessed it will ever see war the same way again. When the sea finally swallowed the last trace of smoke, the battle slipped from the realm of noise into memory. Yet memory, like salt, never truly dissolves. It lingers in every story, in every calculation, in every engineer's blueprint, drawn after the guns fall silent. The wreckage drifted for days, but its meaning traveled much farther. In offices far from the front, analysts pored over fragments of metal and testimonies from the few who survived, trying to define what had changed. They spoke of tactics and logistics of new weapon ranges and engagement envelopes. But beneath the equations lay something deeper, the shattering of certainty itself. The battle had proved that technology could outpace courage, that invention could erase entire doctrines overnight. The Flak crews had fought with bravery, but bravery no longer equaled survival. What the sea had shown was that war had crossed another invisible threshold, one where the machine's reach had finally exceeded the human body's ability to resist it. It was not the first time history had turned this page, but never before had it done so with such cold precision. In the weeks that followed, reports spread through the fleets like rumors of a ghost. Commanders adjusted convoy formations, widening distances, recalculating arcs of fire. Scientists returned to their labs with renewed urgency, determined to answer range with range, speed with speed. Factories began adapting old designs, installing heavier mounts and smarter fire control systems. And yet, even as blueprints multiplied, a quiet truth grew among those who had seen the new weapon in action. No metal could fully close the gap between man and machine. The distance had become moral as much as physical. For the survivors, the change lived not in diagrams, but in the silence that came after the fighting stopped. They found themselves measuring every new sound, the hum of engines, the whistle of wind, against the memory of that day. Some would never again look at the horizon without imagining the unseen threat beyond it. Others found a strange peace in understanding that war had no finish line, only new beginnings disguised as victories. The fear of the unknown transformed into a grim respect for the intelligence behind it. Even those who hated it couldn't help but admire its ruthless efficiency. Historians would later mark this moment as the point where modern warfare began to fracture into something more impersonal. No longer was victory defined solely by courage or sacrifice. It became a contest of innovation, of who could think faster, build lighter, strike farther. The men who fought in that narrow corridor of the sea had unknowingly ushered in a new era. Their defeat became a lesson taught in academies, a warning written into doctrine: never let the enemy dictate the range of war. Yet beyond the textbooks and diagrams, another legacy took shape, one quieter, more human. Those who had lived through it began to see their enemy not as monsters but as mirrors. Both sides were bound by the same relentless logic: to survive meant to invent, and to invent meant to destroy. The sea had become a proving ground, not for valor, but for understanding how far humanity would go to master its own fear. The line between defense and aggression blurred until both became the same act carried out under different flags. In later years, as new wars rose and fell, the echoes of that morning continued to shape decisions. Aircraft grew faster, guns, smarter targets, more elusive. But the lesson remained unchanged. Every advantage births its countermeasure. Every breakthrough carries its shadow. The wooden planes that once defied steel would one day be replaced by missiles that never saw the faces they killed. What began as a clash of metal and muscle evolved into a war of information, of algorithms and signals. Yet the feeling, the breathless pause before impact, the silence after destruction, remained eternal. At the Naval Archives, long after the war ended, a curator once opened a crate marked with the date of that battle. Inside lay fragments of hull plating warped by heat, their surfaces etched with serial numbers half erased by salt. He ran his hand over the metal and realized it was not simply debris, it was testimony. Each scar told the story of men who had stood at the edge of their era, facing something they could not yet name. They had not just fought a battle. They had witnessed the moment when history tilted forward. And perhaps that is the real inheritance of that day. Not the victory or the loss, not the numbers and reports or the medals awarded, but the realization that progress carries its own kind of terror. The ocean remains unchanged, still reflecting light, like a mirror too calm to show the ghosts beneath. But to those who know where to look, its silence speaks of a truth carved in steel and fire, that every generation learns the same hard lesson. There is no safety in what we think we understand. The battle faded into textbooks, the names into stone, the ships into legend. Yet its echo endures in every new weapon, tested in every pilot who trusts a machine more than his own hands, in every strategist who redraws the map of risk. Time will move on, and the world will call it progress. But for those who remember it, will always be something else. A quiet reminder that every innovation born in war leaves behind a debt that can never truly be paid. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in the stillness between waves, that debt waits as patient as the sea itself. The sea remembers what men try to forget. In the silence that follows, war, debris sinks, engines rust, and the noise fades, but the meaning endures. What happened out there was not just a battle, it was the moment the future tore through the present. Innovation outran doctrine, courage met the limits of its reach, and the world was forced to understand that survival no longer belonged only to the brave, but to those who could adapt faster than fear itself. Every ship, lost every life taken, became part of a new equation, one written not in glory, but in consequence. Technology had proven its power to rewrite the rules overnight, to erase certainty and replace it with distance, precision, and silence. Yet within that silence, something still human remained: the refusal to surrender, the stubborn will to learn, rebuild, and rise again. The men who stood amid the wreckage didn't just endure, they became the bridge between one age of war and the next. And so the echo of that battle still travels through time. It speaks to every generation that builds weapons faster than it builds wisdom. It reminds us that every invention carries a choice: to defend or to dominate, to protect or to erase. The lesson is clear. Technology changes the range, but humanity defines the purpose. The next horizon will always come. The only question that remains is who we will be when we meet it.